So, before starting with Srimad Bhagavatam, I would like to say how it originated. Now, as we all know that Bhagavad Gita has 700 verses, and it talks about the bodily conception, and it basically talks about who I am, what do I do, what is my karma, etc. And from there, actually, the Srimad Bhagavatam begins that talks about the stories and the sages of stories and sages of sorry, 1 second. Yeah, Namaya Sharna. So it basically talks about 88,000 rishis in the forest doing yagnas for us in Kali Yuga so that we have a spiritual progress and we do not get contaminated by all the material things that we have here. And so Srimad Bhagavatam is basically, so as we all know that there are five bodily concepts in the Bhagavad Gita. In Srimad Bhagavatam, we have around 10, like Sarga, there's Visarga, etc. And in today's discussion, we're going to talk about mostly Sarga itself, which covers the chapter 7 and even the Visarga. Um, so, as we all know, that Srimad Bhagavatam has 12 cantos, and each canto signifies the body part of the Lord. The canto 1 and 2 are the feet, which establishes the foundation, where we meet Parikshit Maharaj and the sages. Canto 3 and 4 talks about the thighs, which goes deeper into the creation, the time, the karma, the spiritual world, etc. Then we come to the Canto 5, which I'm going to be talking about mostly, given an introduction, which develops the description of the universe, its divisions into the Visarga, and the dynasties and the great sages and the rulers that we've had. And we're going to talk about the lineage of the emperors. Now, I'm going to present it as a story. So, the main hero of the story, or in general, when we talk about Srimad Bhagavatam, we talk about Bharat Maharaj. So, he is the protagonist here. And how do we arrive at Bharat Maharaj is through Swambhuva Manu. So Swambhuva Manu and Satrupa are the progenitors of the human society, and um, they have around they have two sons and three daughters, and amongst them there is obviously Prashruti, there is Akuti, etc. Now, amongst the sons, I mean, all the sons and daughters, they get married except one son, which we specifically talk about in Canto 5, and that is Priyavat Maharaj. Yes. So, Priyavatra Maharaj, he is another son of Swambhuva Manu, and over here the storyline changes. So we deeply go into the renunciation. So what happens in Canto 5 is that we often talk about the rulers who keep switching from, the royal lives and the renunciation, how they enjoy the material pleasures. At the same time, they come back to a renunciated place where they give up everything, right? So Priyavrata, he wanted to remain absorbed in the spiritual life rather than ruling and empowering, etc. So now what happened was he initially he went to the forest and he used to go pray to Lord Brahma. And he for many millions of years he used to just stay in the forest and just pray. When there was no other ruler to rule over the dynasty, his father came to him in the forest personally to meet him and to call him to rule the empire. Um, so now there was a dilemma that he was put into because he was a direct disciple of Narad Muni, right? And he was meditating. Now, meditation, what I mean by meditation is Shravanam, Smaranam, and Kirtanam, that we all know. It's hearing, thinking of the Lord, along with Kirtan activities. Um, Even us in today's world, we're supposed to follow these basic principles, as we all know. If if we're not able, if we follow these principles, this is a direct path to the Godhead. And if we're not able to follow these principles, it's because of two reasons. That one is Vaishnava Aparadh, and second is it's the Lord's plan. Um, and how do you overcome these? If you have committed a Vaishnava Aparadh, knowingly, of course, then you have to seek blessing of the Vaishnava that you have committed Aparadh to. And of course, if it's the Lord's plan, you can do everything that you want in your power. You can chant, you can do kirtan, you can preach, you can do whatever you want, but if it's the Lord's plan, it's going to eventually come to you. You will have better plans later on that the Lord has designed for you. Now, now obviously when since Priyarad Maharaj was in such a dilemma that he was supposed to go rule the dynasty as his father asked him to. He was also asked by his spiritual master, um, Narad Muni, to stay and meditate. And obviously, both are a very crucial and important part of their life, his life. So he was in a very big confusion. He was very apprehensive about going to the empire or staying and meditating because he cannot give up his devotional services. Like, even for example, he had this condition where he had to meditate in the forest, and he was almost done with this verse of his, where he had to sit and meditate, and he was almost done. Like for example, we'll be chanting around Japamala, right? And when we are almost done with the round, imagine we have four more beads left, and imagine your mother or your father calls you for a seva. Now, obviously, you're going to tell them to, like, a little bit, let me just finish the round and I will come. I will join you for the seva. But here, what we observe is Lord Brahma comes into place. He himself comes and he suggests Priyarad Maharaj to go and rule the empire. So, even though he was doing a lot of sadhana, Shravanam, Smaranam, Lord Brahma himself told him, give up the spiritual, not the spiritual aspect, but give up the meditation and go to the empire and take care of that. Now, why did that happen? It's because of the intention. It's because Lord Brahma knows that he has bhava, that anything that he does, he will be able to overcome the material desires, etc., through his spiritual activities. So now, obviously, for example, me, if I'm chanting, if I'm almost done with the round, and if my mother calls me for a seva, I will be like, Ma, wait, please, I'll just finish it and I'll come. Same situation here. And this is not me that I'm talking about, this is Priyavad Maharaj, a very, very high position, spiritual master that we're talking about. And he left his spiritual duties just so that he can go and rule the empire. Now, obviously, when he was also very apprehensive about going to the empire, Lord Brahma also was like, if you are stubborn, of course, your father is even more stubborn, but I'm your great grandfather. I am the most stubborn out of all. So if I made the decision, you have to follow it. So just like how we have to follow the instructions of our spiritual leaders and gurus, right? So yes. So what happened was so he goes and he continues to rule the empire. And over there, now we basically talk about the dynasty of Priyavad Maharaj, which is specifically talking about Visarga, which is the second creation. Now there's Sarga and Visarga. The difference is Sarga is the first creation, And Sarga is the first creation, Visarga is the second creation. So Sarga is everything that the Lord Himself creates. Visarga is Lord Brahma creates, right? So now as we know that if we are following all the duties, now one takeaway here is we following all the duties, we're chanting, we're meditating, we're doing everything, all the seva. At the end, since we are in Kali Yuga as well, we have a lot of duties. For example, someone has to go teach, someone has to go learn, someone has to go to school, college, office, etc. Now, if we're not guided by a spiritual master or a teacher like Narad Muni and Lord Brahma in this case, specifically in this case, um, we're basically like a bull without a rider. A bull without a rider will go wherever, it'll ram its head wherever it wants. But with a driver, wherever it pulls, right, it'll go in that direction. We're like a blind bull without a spiritual master. It's basically like saying, if you're not comfortable merging your material life and your spiritual life, then your Shravanam, Smaranam, and Kirtanam is not doing that well. For example, we tell the kids not to come near snakes. Why is that? Because they're poisonous. But what if we remove the poison from the snakes? Are they still dangerous? No. That's exactly the case. What we are doing here is we're removing all the impurities by chanting every day, by hearing the Lord's name every single day, getting used to it so that whenever we have anything in our material life, day-to-day activities, we can overcome them and continue our practices without any interruptions, right? So, yes. So it's basically when you cannot control your senses. And for example, a spiritually controlled versus a spiritually uncontrolled being, when they enter a forest, the uncontrolled being it's basically like entering the forest, entering the place with six wives. And the six wives signify the mind and the five senses. And if you cannot overcome lust, if you cannot overcome these impurities in your heart and your soul, then you will not be able to continue your activities and your practices elsewhere. Now, obviously, we have a we have Prerad Maharaj ruling over the empire, and he has basically detached himself. He is doing his duty, detaching himself from the outcomes, the process, everything. Whatever he is doing with a pure heart as a duty, not as something that he will look as a profit aspect. So now he has a few sons that I'll be talking about. It's like a family tree that follows, it's like a lineage. Now there's Agnidhara, that's the eldest son, that who also gets married. Um, Purvachiti, the wife's name was Purvachiti, who he basically fell in love with. And because of the lust, I mean, and she eventually passed away. Because of the lust, he also wanted to he also wanted to follow her into the world, that is Pitraloka, and he did not want to go back to the Godhead, right? So because of that, because of lust being a factor, even such great personalities like Agnidhara himself, even though he was a great devotee, you know, the direct son, the eldest son of Priyarad Maharaj, even he fell for lust. That just shows that even we in Kali Yuga, 16 rounds, doing Aarti, Kirtan, we should be very, very careful with all these activities that we do and put our heart, mind, and soul into everything that we do. Right. Then Agnidhara had another son, and his eldest son, his name was Nabhi, and he performed yagnas with his wife. He was also very, very spiritually devoted. The lineage follows. He was also very spiritually devoted, and what he did was he performed the yagnas for years and years and years, and he wanted the Lord himself to appear. And guess what happened? The Lord himself appeared in front of them. Now, when in that time, obviously, now it's not possible, but if, for example, if they're praying so much, if they're, performing yagnas so much for the Lord himself to, arrive, once he's arrived, now what? It's basically like a poor man, a beggar calling a multi-millionaire, billionaire for asking what, maybe 10 rupees, 20 rupees. What's that going to do? Because that's exactly what Nabi asked for. The couple asked for their son to be just like the Lord. They asked for, material desire. They asked for my son, our son, which which I cannot say it's wrong, but is still a material desire. If we are chanting, if we are praying, if we are, in this case, if they are doing yagnas to, call the Lord Himself, we are not supposed to make a request, make you know, demand a wish. We're not supposed to do that. It's supposed to be out of love. It's supposed to be out of we admire you, we desire your presence, your love. That should be the bhava, not material desires. But what Navi did here was he asked for his son to be just like you. And that's what the Lord demanded, even though he said that there's no one like me. But sure, if you have asked for it, you've done so many yajnas, of course I will grant you this wish. Your son shall be just like me. And then came Lord Rishabdev. Now, when he was which is basically the reincarnation of the Lord himself. And Rishabdev basically means the best of humanity. And so what happened was Lord Rishabdev had 100 sons. Out of the 100, 10 were Kshatriya, and out of the 10 Kshatriya sons, the eldest one was Bharat Maharaj, and the rest 81 were pure Brahmanas, not by birth, but they were they practiced to become Brahmanas, and the rest nine were Navyo Navyugendras. Yes. One second, sorry. Yes. So now, as we talked about the eldest Kshatriya son being Bharat Maharaj, Bharat Maharaj was the eldest son. He received the responsibility of ruling the earth. Now, after Lord Rishabdev, obviously he granted that to Bharat Maharaj, and his reign was very, very powerful, very, very impactful. It's been talked about, I think, almost in every canto, every Veda scripture, wherever it is. I think he is one of the most prominent rulers that we have had. Um, Now, obviously, the earth previously was known as the Agnabha Varsa, which later became as Bharatvarsha because of Bharat Maharaj. Now, now we all know that we have all these political divisions. We have India, Pakistan, China, etc. But now, as we all know, India was is still known as Bharatvarsha because of Bharat Maharaj. Now he Now he ruled for the welfare of the citizens, and he ruled for he treated everyone equally in the society. The Kshatriyas, the Shudras, the Brahmanas, everyone was treated equally. And there was no such thing as you're born as a Vaishnava, you're born as a Kshatriya. You're supposed to practice your duties and make your way there. Now, Bharat Maharaj married Panchajani, who was the daughter of Vishwarupa. And they had five sons, Sumati, Rasabharta, Dhrumaketu, etc. Now, now we talked about Bharat Maharaj, how he came into he came into power. Now, what we can see here is that out of all the emperors that we've had, out of all the um, rulers that we've had till now, their sons, right? Everyone has had either a downfall or they've again had, you know, they've again brought up the empire to light again. It's like, it's a very volatile thing where the empire falls down again, it again brings comes up again, falls down, comes up, and it's just because of not being able to practice spiritual life and material life. So this was the initial conversation that I was talking about earlier. That was between sorry, that was between Parikshit Maharaj and Sukadev Goswami. And Parikshit Maharaj, since he had a curse of dying in the next 1 week, he had a lot of these questions. He had obviously resigned from his empire, and he was asking Sukha Goswami these questions like, how can I, since I'm already, going to die, I want to know how to practice spiritual life and material life, and how do you do that? You cannot do that. It's not possible. How can you have three wives? How can you have 100 sons? How can you have, five daughters, etc.? And you can follow the spiritual path. How can you do that? And obviously, Sukadev Goswami said that, of course, it's possible. It's just you have to do with the right bhava. You have to, you have to make sure that your senses are controlled, and that takes time. That takes time, and we're talking not Kali Yuga. We're talking about this millions and billions of years ago. Right now, also, of course, when we have a lot of things happening in life, we have even, for example. You know, Guru Maharaj, his organist, Jagta Goswami Maharaj, he in Mayapur, in his earlier days, of course, when he was helping around volunteering for the temples there, the preaching there, there were a lot of, there was a shortage of manpower. And there was a story where he had to go to the toilets and the commodes there, and he had to clean them himself. That just shows that even though he's such a great personality, a great spiritual, you know, being to look up to for a lot of people, he kept all of that aside. He just focused on bhava. He just focused on the principles, and he showed everyone. He put himself as the example, and he showed everyone that yes, you can, um, whatever it is, you have to keep your ego aside, everything aside, and you have to do your duties as mentioned by your spiritual master. So that was my personal example. And then we talk about, of course, coming back to Bharat Maharaj. So, Bharat Maharaj, he used to worship only Lord Vasudev. And why specifically Lord Vasudev is because he realized that Lord Vasudev is basically just the Almighty. Everyone who worship all the demigods, they are all just the bodily parts, they're the limbs of Vasudev. So after ruling over the empire, he was very detached from the whole empire. He was very controlled with his own senses. He had five sons as well, as I mentioned, and he was able to follow these principles like all the other sons, like Agnidhara, Nabi, and Lord Rishabdev as well. But they all had a downfall. Now, what we see here is coming. Not a downfall, but after 10 crore years of ruling into this empire, he had retired and he had gone to Pulashrama. Yes, sorry. Yes, so he'd gone to Pulashrama. Now, obviously, he didn't have a hard time retiring as was, he was already very detached and, 10 crore years might seem impossible for us to comprehend, but even that time was a long time for him to rule. So he leaves the kingdom, he leaves the wealth, the palace, the family responsibilities, of course, which is, I think, one of the most important, and the royal position. And he again comes to this renunciate position, and he goes to Pulashrama. Now, this region of Pulashrama is basically in Haridwar, near Nepal, and you have the sacred Shaligram deities there. You get a lot of Shaligram because of the Gandaki River that flows through there. It's a very sacred place, right? Now, obviously, the transition is something that we have to look into. That first he was just a king, and now he is almost no one with nothing, absolutely nothing. He has given up everything. Can we ourselves, like at least for me, I cannot imagine myself leaving my house without my bag, my phone, of course, my even chanting bag also. I think I cannot just leave my house just like that, just disregarding all my duties. I have an assignment to turn upon Monday. I cannot leave everything, right? So now if you look at Bharat Maharaj's sadhana and bhava, he lived very, very simple, right? He collected fruits and vegetables and flowers and tulsi leaves. And the description given in Srimad Bhagavatam is very beautifully described. He goes around during the day, he collects all these things, and he goes and washes it to Lord Vasudeva. And his life deeply, absorbs in Shravanam, Kirtanam, and Smaranam. That's the principles that I was talking about. And obviously, his devotional consciousness became very, very advanced, and he it came to a point where when he was worshipping, when he was praying, performing yagnas, he was tearing up, he was trembling, the hair stand on him, he was getting goosebumps, and he was into deep absorption. I think that kind of prayers and that kind of mental state is very, very hard to obtain in Kali Yuga as of now. So this is called bhava. This is the main principle. It's called bhava that we're supposed to follow. We're supposed to have in our heart to be completely absorbed into Krishna consciousness. Now, obviously, the point is that the rules are not necessary, but obviously the intention is you can do whatever you want. You can chant. You can. It depends on person to person that you like chanting more, you like hearing more, you like preaching more, you like doing arti, prasadam, whatever it is. But the point should be then when sadhana purifies the heart, the practice becomes deeply internalized. That's the principle. Now, now, how do we connect Bharata to our own sadhana? Is that we live in a very entirely like different age, right? We're not kings. We're not performing yagnas. We're not doing all of that. And very specific yagna that I was going to talk about is so there were yagnas, and okay. So this text five from the chapter seven. To perform sacrifices were known as Agnihotra, Darsha, Purnamasa, Chaturmasya, Pashu Yajna, where horse was sacrificed. And this became a very controversial, a very hot take later on that, people started asking why was horse sacrificed that time? Why were birds and other living beings and animals sacrificed that time for yagnas? Isn't that killing animals? Isn't that brutality? But the answer to that Srila Prabhupada has given in the purport is that time when the animals they are on the verge of death, they are almost at the end of their lives, and they're being sacrificed, and it was a ritual. It was a it was a sacrifice. artificial perfection that these sadhus and rishis were practicing to, sacrifice the animal and produce a new life right in that instant. That used to happen. Now, obviously, we cannot sacrifice an animal right now as well, even if it's on the verge of death, and produce a new life. We cannot do that. It's not possible now. It is impossible in Kali Yuga, and it's a sin to do that in Kali Yuga. It's clearly written here. And so now we cannot do all of this, the sevas and the yagnas, the performances that he did in that time right now. But what do we take from him is the principle that Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Sadhu Sangha, Seva, etc. Right? Now, there is a formula that we use that is called the 7S formula. I picked it up from a book referring to this. But before getting into that, I'll just give you a brief breakdown of the chapter 7 since it's a very small chapter. There are only 20 shlokas, I guess. So the first to four shloka, it talks about his marriage. That is, he gets married and he gets into the emperor. The fifth to seventh shloka talks about his sacrifices, his consciousness, and to offering and doing all the, prayers and everything. That increase his bhakti a lot. And talking about the shloka 8 to 10, after ruling for 10 crore years, he retired to Kulashrama, where it was near the Gandaki River. And over there, he also, there's another point, he also met Lord Hari, which is basically a form of the Lord coming himself for each and every single devotee. Like we all have the Lord in ourselves, in our heart. So for him, it was Lord Hari who came and he gave his darshan to Bharat Maharaj and showed him that, yes, you know, I am here. Thank you. Not thank you, of course. Whatever you're doing, I'm here. Krishna is very merciful. So his, the form that he comes into and he blesses all the devotees is very, very powerful, right? And then 11 to 14th text, he talks about worshipping Narayan, etc., and getting the symptoms of the perfection of his spiritual journey. Now that's the whole chapter. And to talk about the 7S formula that I was mentioning earlier, it's basically the board for the bhakti, that we have to follow. One is the sangha, that's the association. Association with devotees is the most crucial thing that we have to have, right? We can chant, we can sing, but we cannot do all of this alone. We cannot be, as Srila Prabhupada said, that we have to spread this movement. With Sangha, we can preach, and eventually we get, the good association protects our consciousness. That's what the whole point is. Then comes sadhana. That is the daily spiritual practice that can be chanting, hearing, reading, remembering, worshipping, arti, whatever it is. And that also creates a daily protection that, yes, even though you have 9 to 5 job, you have this assignment, you have to maybe cook this, you have a lot of work today, you obviously have to complete your sadhana first. That is your daily protection. Whatever you do, you have to chant, hear, read, and it's a non-negotiable, right? Then we have sadhu acharya. That is basically our external conduct, which should support our spiritual life. That is how do we behave, how we speak, how we treat devotees, just in general, how humane we are, and how do we deal with responsibilities, and how we control our senses, as I said, lust and everything. And this is an example of, this is where an example of a senior devotee, a Vaishnava, and even gurus come into picture. Srila Prabhupada has explained this very well in the Srimad Bhagavatam that having a spiritual master, spiritual guru, like how we have His Holiness Jayataka Swami Maharaj, how it's so important to have a spiritual master in our lives, right? Then obviously we have seva at the end. which keeps us making ourselves, just staying in center. Um, Obviously, Bharat Maharaj's entire royal life can be understood through his principle, but he did not really rule for himself. He ruled for the responsibility, not for the joyous part, but for the responsibility. He served Vasudeva, he did yagnas and everything. That just shows that, yes, he is a sevak and he has the bhava to do seva. For us, it can be the service can be small externally, but enormous spiritually when performed with the right consciousness. Then is Swadhyaya, that is basically the regular study of Shastras. Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, they all give the teachings of acharyas and other spiritual masters that give us the right spiritual framework to follow. And without Shastras, obviously, we can make mistakes and assume a lot of things and have a lot of misconceptions and get, in depth or with other ideas and prospects, right? So, Srila Prabhupada's entire mission was just to study and distributing this transcendental literature. Then is the next is Satkatha. That is basically keeping our consciousness engaged in the spiritually meaningful subject matter, talking about Krishna, hearing about Krishna, discussing the teachings of the acharyas, um, keeping our mind occupied with the right meaningful things, subjects, and that directly converts that directly connects to the Bhagavatam's emphasis on the Shravanam and Kirtanam. Then the last S is Shraddha. That is the faith. And ultimately, we do need faith that obviously, if we cannot see God, that doesn't mean that He doesn't exist, right? Um, so we need Shraddha, we need faith in Krishna, we need faith in Guru, we need faith in Shastras, the process of bhakti, etc. Um, so now these seven principles that are told, Sangha, Sadhana, Sadhvacharya, Seva, Swadhyaya, and Satkata, Shraddha, they work together, and these principles are not like emergency tools that you're supposed to use. They are basically like your daily boat to your spiritual life. Now, obviously, there's one more thing. I'm so sorry. 1 second. Yes. Yes. So there's also the 4 R's and 3 A's that I would like to talk from the story. Now, the attached material gives the when we attach to the material world, we obviously have the 4 R's that reduce our spiritual connection to Krishna. One is reduced sadhana, one is reasoning, one is ritualistic, and one is restlessness. So these four that I just told are from the story itself directly, and as I mentioned, these principles were not exactly followed, but they were a part of every single son that was there in the empire. And because of that, there was a downfall for them, eventually leading to, either a great, a very big downfall of the dynasty, or another curse, or, another sin. Then the 3 A's that I would like to talk about is alertness, association, and aspiration. I think that is, be back to Godhead and stay connected with the devotees. And obviously, alertness is, staying away from Maya and lust, as I mentioned. Now, now, if you look at the entire journey leading to Bharat Maharaj, we see something very beautiful. That is, Priyavata teaches us that we can accept responsibility without losing the spiritual purpose. Agnidhara teaches us that the attachment can influence our destination. Nabhi teaches us that the power of sincere desire and sacrifice can actually get you what you want. And Rishabdev, Lord Rishabdev teaches us that the human life is meant for purification, not simply sense gratification. And Bharat Maharaj actually brings all of these lessons together. He ruled the entire planet. He performed great sacrifices. He had wealth, family, all the prestige that he wants. But he understood that everything ultimately belongs to Vasudeva. Then he left everything behind and went to Kulashrama, right? Where he performed all the, the bhakti and the prayers, etc. And there's also another text that talks about the different avatar of the Lord being in our heart, which I would like to give an example for Jadurani Devi Dasi Mataji. So she was actually uh, in association with Srila Prabhupada, and she was basically the painter for Srila Prabhupada, and she used to help make paintings and drawings, etc. for him. And she had a doubt that, if we all have Krishna in our heart, what is the form? What is the avatar of Krishna? Does it vary? Is it the same? How does he look like? We have seen so many deities, we've seen so many uh, murtis and deities, everything, everywhere, but I don't know how the Krishna inside me looks like. And Prabhupada has actually given the answer in this specific chapter, that is the chapter 7, Canto 5, as I talked about Lord Hari. Every devotee following the principles and having the bhava and doing seva for Krishna has a different form of the Lord Himself present inside. Um, Obviously, we cannot see it, but Bharat Maharaj, since he was so much into devotion, he was able to see Lord Hari. We all have a different avatar inside of us, of Krishna. So, yes, that was the answer. Um, Now, this obviously the story also gives us a very big warning that never become careless into our spiritual life, and that's why we need the seven S's, and that's basically the board for a spiritual journey. And yes, I think this was all about Bharat Maharaj. I couldn't get into the three lifetimes of Bharat Maharaj. That's the deer and the baby. I couldn't do that because that's chapter 8, and chapter 7 is very, very small. It's just about, the practices of Bharat Maharaj. So, yes, everyone, thank you so much for your time. I'm so sorry. I'm very apologetic for all the mispronunciations and the mistakes that I've made. This was the first time I was reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, so it's a very new experience for me. Obviously, with His Grace Kendra Chaitanya Das Prabhu, I've been doing some reading, Bhagavad Gita and everything, but I've never really, opened Srimad Bhagavatam, read a whole chapter, gone through lectures, different book references. Even my mother, she sat me through all these days, helped me a lot. So this was a very new experience for me. So thank you so much to all the devotees, all the senior devotees, for all your association and your prayers. Yes, thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Yuvraj. Thank you so much. I think it was a wonderful session. You had taken us to whole previous this thing, and I know this chapter is not very big and there is not much philosophy there. So I think you covered it very well, and you took us 7S, taking us into various aspects of our spiritual life. I really appreciate, and I had told last time also Vedant, when Vedant was taking that, it really gives a pleasure to see you all youngsters taking responsibility of, taking this, because you all have the responsibility of taking the movement ahead. And unless and until youngsters come ahead, I think our time is gone, whatever we could have done. We didn't do anything for the movement, but still, you know, but you all have to take it forward. So I really, really appreciate that you have put so much effort. And as you rightly said, that, presenting session helps us when we go and hear lectures, we find out the important points. So it really helps us. So that's why always say that, anything else if preaching can bring or not into our life is one thing is that it purifies ourselves. So making other devotees and all that may not be, it's all Lord's plan. But when we speak something to others, it really gives us, because we need to prepare, we need to read, we need to, and that helps us to bring us into daily sadhana. So I really appreciate that you all youngsters are taking so much initiative of. And by the way, to let everybody know, I didn't ask Yuvraj to take. I think it was his own decision. I think our Mataji, Nidai Priya Mataji, told him to take, which is a very good, thing, because duty of the parents is to inspire them to move ahead in spiritual life, because whatever said and done, unfortunately, the youngsters are getting exposed to too many things outside which may not be very conducive to our Krishna consciousness. So I really appreciate the Nitai Priya Mataji and Nityanand Vilas Prabhu putting endeavor to put both the children into a wonderful spiritual life along with their material lives as well. Prabhu is Yuvraj is enjoying along with that. I've seen him doing many times seva when uh, you know some spiritual guests are coming into their home and in temples. So a lot of uh, spiritual tilt Yuvraj has, which is a very good thing. So once again, thank you so much, Yuvraj. I really appreciate that so much effort you have put. Thank you so much. Anybody has any question or comments?